Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Streaming Alchemy Show. On today's show, we're going to be looking at the Stream Deck XL. This is the latest and the largest multi-button control surface offered by Elgato. But before we get to that, I just want to remind everyone that for today's show, just like all our shows, we will be accepting viewer video call-in. So if you have a question or want to make a comment, just connect to the link that's shown here below, which is https call-in.tv/streaming alchemy. And that will connect you to somebody in the studio and they can get you on air to join us. So I'd like to get started, and probably the best place to get started would be to look at the new Stream Deck XL compared to the original Stream Deck. So one key difference, obviously, is that the original Stream Deck had 15 keys, and the new Stream Deck XL has 32 function keys. Uh, Now, the original Stream Deck was really designed for the live game streamers that were looking for ways to simply control their production while letting them focus on the core of their game that they wanted to play live for an audience. The Stream Deck XL really broadens that market now. The Stream Deck XL really is a function device that can work for much larger productions with much larger needs. So clearly the form factor is different. You know, this is 15 and this is 32, but also the physical layout, from a size is very different. This fits very neatly for a live gaming streamer, between their monitor and keyboard, and is very easy to access that way. The Stream Deck is really designed to stand more on its own and to handle any type of general production requirement that you may have that could be controlled by logical multiple buttons. Uh, the other thing, because this was designed with that broader audience in mind, it now has, if you look at the back, a detachable USB cable. And that may not seem like a big deal in today's world, but the original Stream Deck had a limited 4-foot cable that came with it. So if this could fit with a system that you had connected, close by, it was great. Otherwise, you needed to get extenders and other things to make it hook up. For the Stream Deck, it comes with a 6-foot USB cable. If that's too large or too small, you can replace it with whatever cable would work for you. The other thing now is the Stream Deck XL comes with a heavy duty magnetic base. So if I want to stand this up on a desk and have this sit there where I could press against it, this base is much more stable and sturdy compared to the lighter weight plastic base that came with the original Stream Deck. But if you think about capabilities on a button by button level, these two devices really are identical. Anything I can do with a key press on the Stream Deck, I can also do with a key press on the Stream Deck XL. So no real differences there on a button by button basis, just a different form factor and a different number of available buttons on the system. So if you think about what you have with these two, you can see the differences. But where the real differences stand out is when you compare Stream Decks to traditional sort of multi-button control surfaces that are available in the market. And the biggest difference for most people is going to be that you can actually use PNG files or GIF files to label your buttons. Now, it may not seem that big a deal, but it opens up a lot of possibilities. As opposed to having to sort of tape labels or cut out little printed labels and stick them onto keys in more traditional interfaces, the fact that you can now use images, PNGs or GIF files, to label your buttons means you can start to change them dynamically. And that is where the Stream Decks really shine. Uh, Beyond just having a set of buttons, these buttons can take on one of two different types of functions. One is when you press a button, it can trigger an action. The other thing, though, is when you press a button, it can open a new page of buttons. So this takes what would essentially be a 15 button or a 32 button control surface and really makes it function well for an unlimited number of trigger actions you may want to have, as long as you can split those up logically across multiple pages of buttons. So really different approach to, now how you can use these keypads dynamically. The other thing is that unlike more traditional, key mappings, what you actually are mapping with the Stream Deck systems are widgets to buttons, and then configuring those widgets to do different types of functionality. So this means that I can ask a single key press to do more sophisticated things, to listen to status that may be coming from a remote device and provide that feedback in the image it displays on the button. So I want to know when I press the button and I'm recording a stream that it's showing me that button press was accepted. I'm actually doing the recording. So again, very powerful types of things beyond using these keys now just as these PNGs on the keys just for labels. They now give you nested keys and they give you feedback on what's going on as a result of the button when you press the button press that you make with that key. So very, very powerful paradigm that you're using now versus a one-to-one button press to triggered action. The other thing, because you're actually working with a proxied uh, agent, some widget that's actually controlling something downstream, you now can do things that not only impact applications that are running on your current desktop, but you can do things that work across the network. So this means that if you wanted to use one of these keypads to control a device that was across your studio, you now can do that. And again, it's one of those powerful things we talked about when we talked about NDI in last week's show, where you have the ability now to route information anywhere you want. These Stream Decks have the ability to route control signals anywhere you want. So anything you want to do that's going to integrate multiple systems on a single keypad can be done with the Stream Deck and the Stream Deck XL. And that's again where the XL really starts to shine. Because when you look at it, you now just don't have the 32 buttons, and it makes sense why. Because you have potentially a lot of devices and a lot of functionality you're going to be able to you're going to be looking to control using a small footprint device like this. All right, so I guess the next step would be to take a look at the Stream Deck software. So for both of these devices, they are controlled by a software application that is provided by Elgato. And what this application effectively does is shows you all the keys that you have available. So that's this piece that you're seeing in the display. And then along the right side of the display, it's showing you all the widgets, the control widgets that you can then map to any one of these keys. So if I wanted to, for instance, assign a website to a key, I can just take and drag that over and drop it on the key. And what you'll see when I drop it now is I have a configuration panel that opens up at the bottom specific to that. So if I wanted to, for instance, in here, type in a URL to open a website, I could just do that here, and that would let me now map that key in, specifically for here. I could put a title, or I could actually ask it to, set the image for the icon from a PNG file. So again, a very simple interface to map functionality onto your keypad. So if you look what I have laid out here, I'm using widgets from two different sections of the Stream Deck interface here. I'm using things that allow me to manipulate what's happening with these buttons. So I can create them, make them folders. I can have them switch profiles, which really just, the layouts that I want to use. I can assign single action or multi-action keep to a single button on here. So if I wanted to do 2 or 3 steps with a single button press, it lets me do that. I can also do things like add timers. So if I wanted to come down here and have a timer clock or a real-time clock, I could add those, and that would be something I'd be able to look at here in the on the Stream Deck interface itself. So from this layout that we have here, in the upper corner, what I have are 2 buttons that are linked to pages. So the first button are linked to control pages that I would use for a TriCaster, and the second is to control pages that I would use to control an OBS system. Here I have launches for specific applications. So this would launch the Stream Deck application that I have here. This could launch OBS. This would launch Studio Monitor, and this would launch another application we'll talk about a little bit later called Companion. So if you look at the launches for all of these, that would be down in the system segment of the widgets that are available. So you'd be able to launch things using the open command. So if I drag that in, and I'll just click on NDI Studio Monitor, this will actually show you the the path to the exe file that will be launched when I press the button. But what I'd really want to show you now is how you could use this in more of a combined way. And for that, I want to look at something that we typically deal with for live production, which is a presenter using PowerPoint to go through a deck of slides. So I actually set up 4 buttons here that I'm using to control the PowerPoint. So the first, like we had on the side, launches the PowerPoint. So it's basically going to take and start it. But because when it launches, I want it to load a specific slide deck and then begin to play that slide deck full screen, I had to use something which let it work with multi-actions, which is the button I talked about up here. So with multiple actions, if I click here, I am actually opening the slides, waiting for 3 seconds. So in this case, I'm just waiting 3 seconds here to give the slide a chance to load up and for PowerPoint to start. And then I'm sending it an F5 hotkey, which tells it start to play the slideshow full screen. Similarly, I have another function which is used to shut everything down. So this will, when I go into, it's again multi-action. So it's 2 key presses, one to stop the actual presentation, and the other to close PowerPoint. So again, two buttons that do multiple functions. And then when the PowerPoint is playing, I now have something which actually just sends hotkeys. So I have a left hotkey and a right hotkey, so I could move between the slides. So let me just actually show you how this would work. Let me set this up over here so we can see how this would work if I wanted to control the PowerPoint. So if we come here, and if you can see here, let me do this so it's a little better. I'm going to press the button here which says Play PowerPoint. And what you see is PowerPoint starting up on the screen behind me, and then it goes full screen. And I have the same controls that I had before if I wanted to do that by touching my screen, but I now can also use the buttons down here that would allow me to go through this and do a presentation without having any access to the screen. So if this was up on a big projection monitor, I didn't have a keyboard, I could do everything I needed to here, and then when I'm done, I could press the close, which will shut everything back down and put me back to where I was before. So with that type of functionality, that's a very straightforward type of production use case, but it also shows the power where you can stack up multiple commands and use them in single button presses to configure the application, not just launch it, but get it set up to exactly the way you need it. So the next thing that I'd probably like to go through here would be looking at how I could control a TriCaster from across the production studio. So if you look here, here's the interface that we have for the TriCaster. And if you could pop up the screen showing the Stream Deck here on the side. Okay. So what I have now is when I mentioned before, I have a button on the top, which is a page button, which has all the functionality that I may want to use to control the TriCaster. So along here, I have things to control all my MEs. I have my auto and take, so I can switch sources from preview to program. I have punch-ins for my program route, so I could take any one of the attached sources and send them out. I have downstream key controls all down here. And I have controls that let me go into any one of my ME slots. So if you wanted to understand how this would work, there's a very interesting thing that's taking place here. So what I wanted to be able to do is control this remotely. And the only way to do that would be to do it across the local network. And TriCaster has a great built-in mechanism that lets it listen for key presses that are coming in across the web. So in this case here, if you look at the screen, uh, you can see that we have the macro page called up. So what I want to do is I want to program specific macro keys on the Stream Deck XL, specific keys on the Stream Deck XL to specific macros in the TriCaster. So because I've set these keys up, let's just look at the auto key here. What it's going to do is it's going to use an HTTP command. So let me, if you could switch, Joe, if you could switch to the desktop for a second over here. I'm sorry, to the computer desktop. Right. So if you look what I have here, what I'm doing is I'm sending an HTTP request to Neural Studio TC1, which is the name of our TriCaster, with a string command after it that sends a specific trigger called auto. And so using this, that is now mapped to the key that I have on the Stream Deck XL. So if we switch back to the TriCaster and show the Stream Deck on the side, what I can ask the macro to do, if you click on the listen bar down below, is you can see that it's now going to be listening for a specific key press. And when I press this button here, it'll now come and say it's received the key and it's mapped the auto to a trigger called net:auto. So all of these buttons, all the functionality here is programmed the same way. So any one of the functions that I want to control on the TriCaster now are mapped this way using these triggers and macros on the TriCaster to do that. So one thing that I wanted to show you in addition that I think is really exemplifies the use of pages is, well, I have at this level here a set of buttons that control common functionality in the TriCaster. I can also go in and control more detailed functionality. So in this case, what I just switched to is a set of buttons designed to control my ME3. That's what's displaying this composited image that you're seeing. So in this case now, I have the ability to overlay keys specifically associated with this mix effects bus. I also can display any specific camera in this main window now that I want it, just with simple button pushes. I could also go to remote guest. So if I had any guests that I wanted to bring on, I have those lined up as a set of keys, or I could bring on multiple guests. And again, this is all taking place remotely here. And then I have different desktop computer screens that I could bring up. So everything that we have here is something that can easily be manipulated through pages of functionality. And it stops you from having to clutter your top levels. So if you start to look as I go through this, my top level can be very simple with just a few key functions. But then under that, I have the ability to tunnel a bit deeper and to actually provide a depth of functionality without cluttering the UI. So I think that gives you a good sense for what you can do with the standard Stream Deck software and the Stream Deck XL platform itself. One other thing, though, that I wanted to talk about is we wanted to show you how to use the Stream Deck with OBS. And to do that, we wanted to do something which involved a very large number of NDI sources. The box that we use here is just a small form factor computer that's running on the computer the Stream Deck is attached to. So this was something that when we thought about it, we were like, I can't really run that here and be successful. It would just overload the computer. So we said, we're going to run this now on the OBS system that we used in our last demo, which is a much higher end system. But again, this is something that will be controlled over the network. So to do that, let me switch to an application called Companion. Now, Companion is very similar in some ways to the software that Stream Deck provides. But one of the big differences with Companion is that it's designed. It's a third-party application, open source, so anybody can download it and install it themselves. But it's designed around the concept of having third parties create controlling widgets, installers for their specific applications, and it basically does the same functionality that the Stream Deck software does, but in an open source community basis that can allow devices that normally wouldn't get community support to be supported by manufacturers. So it's something that's very powerful. It's not yet available in production for the Stream Deck XL, but it is for the Stream Deck. So for this demo, I just want to show you some of the things we can do using the companion application, but we're going to be using the smaller Stream Deck to do this. So if I take this here and look at the interface here, what I have essentially is a new layout for what Stream Deck did with their software. I can take and add a category, and a category is an instance of a widget. So I can go to something like streaming, which would have OBS Studio in it. I could also look by manufacturer instead of by category and go to any one of the video production companies that has a control support for their device, and I could add that. But in this case now, we've actually let me get my mouse back. We've actually set this up to remotely control OBS. So the next step over, whereas in the Stream Deck application, you drag your widgets over to the keys, you pick your widget, and then you start to map them into keys for how you may want to use that. So with this button layout now, I've set up a set of buttons that I want to use to control OBS remotely. So I have a fade to black, which is just one of the scenes. I have a scene here, which is a button here, which I'm going to control a scene that shows previews of all my live to air guests. I have the other buttons, which will show all my cameras, and I have buttons which will show all my computer interfaces. So those buttons are all set up. And the way these buttons work effectively is they're telling OBS to change from one scene to another. So the action that I have assigned here, where you can pick a key, up or down action, is I said OBS change scene. I can add a delay if I wanted to time these. And then based on this being a change scene, I can pick which scene I actually want to control with this. So this is for desktop previews. So let's actually go down. And where I'm going to start for this is I'm going to start with what I had as set up as a multi-view scene. So in this multi-view scene, if you can switch here, I am now showing from my OBS system all of my live to air guests that could be coming in, all of my cameras, and all of the desktop systems that I have available. But with the way this layout is worked now, if I were a producer and I needed to keep an eye and call shots, I could look at this screen. I could also go in and say, let me look at all my guests. Let me look at all my cameras. Or let me look at the desktops with the applications where I have the TriCaster, I have our call-in system, I have the OBS unit itself, and here I have the screen from the computer we're running here. So this ability now to manipulate a remote system using a multifunction key device like the Stream Deck and drive that to, in this case, a display in the studio, or it could be a display in another area inside the production area where you have a producer sitting. This is now all possible. And the fact that this could be set up as pages of buttons on a single unit that could control multiple different things is really incredibly powerful for the types of productions you can now start to control using the Stream Deck family. And to be honest, the Stream Deck XL is really for the form factor and the functionality. It's just an incredible device that I would highly recommend adding to any of your production gear. It definitely should be something high on your list to get. So that's our show for this week. So thank you all very much for joining us. We definitely appreciate having you here. Our next show will be a week from this Friday, and at the same time at 2 p.m. And what we'll be doing is we'll be talking about production automation, different ways to control and streamline your productions, make more sophisticated productions with lower chances of error. So we look forward to seeing you. Until then, thank you very much.